I love One Piece offline events. We have about 4 waves in a competitive season that span across an entire year. And in those waves, we have 2 types of tournaments that primarily dominate the space. We have regionals and we have treasure cups. I'm going to run you through all of that today before I jump into the NoHeroes Online Regional that's happening right now. Treasure cups and regionals vary slightly, but functionally they are the same thing. One of the best things about regional and treasure cup competition is going to a city, a location, and playing against opponents you'd never have the chance to face in a locals environment. The downside of that is the cost involved. If that competition is not in your home city, the costs stack up quickly. Flights, hotels, food. All of these things need to be accounted for and can make the experience a little bit pricey, and not everyone has the financial aptitude to not bankrupt themselves playing this game. This is where the other types of competition come into play. Online regionals and online treasure cups. Functionally, they are the exact same as an offline tournament, except you play it right from your home. There are a few differences and some nuances that you need to pay attention to. Most of the organization of the competition takes place via Discord. So as long as you have that installed on your PC, you're good to go. There are a few other elements you're going to need, like some extra tech. If you're making the jump from offline gameplay to online gameplay, there's a few things you're going to need. When looking to take part in an online regional, you need to make sure you have your essential pieces. So this would include your 50 card deck, your 1 leader, and your 10 card Don deck. In official tournament environments, you need to make sure that the only cards that are in your effective deck box are the ones that are in play. Even in online tournaments, you can get deck checked. And if they find an additional card, maybe it's a spare piece that you've been playing with, inside this deck box, they can still issue a warning or potentially even a further fine based on the TO and based on the judge interpretation. Another thing in online competition that I think is also great to consider is that a lot of information can get missed and cannot be as clear as if you were sitting in front of someone across the table. Having a dice tray that allows you to have a lot of options to communicate extra information and make it clear to your opponent can be beneficial. Just the usual 6-sided die, these can be great to track cost reduction or empowerment depending on the decks you play, to make sure that the board is clear to both players at all times. Dice are also important for determining turn order, as most players in online will still do highest roll on the die to decide who gets to choose whether they go first or second. Another use for these dice can also be to track hand size. It can also do to track your life and make your life clearer. For example, if I was to lay out 5 life, the way I've layered my life is very clear to tell how much life I have at any given point. Because it's staggered, you can count the notches and effectively see the life. But in an IRL game, maybe my life is a little bit more congested and I'm trying to save space on my board, and this is just how I stack things. Maybe that's not as clear. So placing a dice to count the life could be useful to make sure that everything is clear to both players. In the same way you can track life, you can also track hand size. I'm a serial fidgeter. So I like to do things with my hands, but I don't want to be at risk of being called a cheater. So what I would do is place the cards face down, and if I leave a dice on top that indicates the hand size, I then don't have to worry about it, and the opponent doesn't have to ask me how many's in my hand. It's clearly there for them to see. While notes are typically frowned upon and not allowed within the tournament rules, in online regionals, sometimes you're allowed to use a die counter to track your opponent's hand size on your end. Spin downs are readily available when you play Magic the Gathering. These are just a 20-sided die. You can get 20-sided dies anywhere, especially if you're playing any form of tabletop gaming. Outside of what you'd usually take to a locals or a regionals, you have to consider extra equipment when it comes to online gameplay in One Piece. This is the Logitech C920. This was the go-to webcam for content creation years ago and is still very good. It is a HD 1080p webcam. Now, most tournament organizers will allow you to participate with a 720p webcam as a baseline requirement, but it's always recommended to have at least 1080p to up the clarity of your board state. Now, I'm using this as a prop because I don't have my microphone down here with me, but you're right. You need a microphone. You need to be able to communicate verbally to your opponents to dictate your actions, and your opponent needs to be able to do the same to you so that you can understand what is happening with the game. Now, in an ideal world, your actions on the board would communicate enough, but there are some times where effects will need to be mandated and attacks will need to be declared where verbally you will need to be heard. Microphone, very important for that. You need to be able to plug both the webcam and the microphone into something. A computer of some description to jump on Discord, to be able to connect to table servers, to check Limitless, to show and share the board states of both players. You'll need a computer and an internet connection to do that. This is what you're plugging your microphone and your webcam into. Now that you know some of the tech involved, let's take a look at a good setup for online play. So right now, as you can see, you've got a lot of space around the map. You can clearly see what is going to happen. There's very little room for me to take my hands and cards and play pieces out of the vision of the camera, which is the most important thing. Vision is everything when it comes to online setups, purely because that is how you can monitor if anyone is going to be cheating you. What's good about this angle is you've got clear view of leader that's going to be played, clear view of the deck, clear view of the Don, and when you'll see in a second, when we come to setting up life, you've got a clear view of that as well. All the information you need to pay attention to is visible. The next thing to check, and this is where players can make it difficult for themselves, is making sure that their hand is visible at all times. So in a lot of setups, it's confined space, which makes it difficult to be able to get your hand and your board in shot. From this angle, you can see my cards, you can understand everything that's happening, and you can also see the cards in my hand without revealing what those cards are. A lot of the times in tournaments in cramped setups, you see players having to tilt their hand forward, which can sometimes reveal, if you go too far, what's in the hand, which players who aren't necessarily the most virtuous or players who want to try and get every possible edge may not tell you they can see your cards. But it's super important that you are cognizant of that, because if you reveal that information, that's you revealing the information. A judge can't side with you and say that your opponent cheated for your careless play, should we say. But thankfully from this angle, no matter how much I tilt, I have to tilt them very, very far for you to be able to get any kind of information from my hand. But you can count the number of cards I have in my hand quite clearly, and that's all you need to be able to. Same thing when we look at the gameplay as well. When you have cards on board, information still readily available. The most important thing when you're making plays or exchanging cards from different areas of play, like your life, your deck, your trash, or your hand, never remove the cards from view of the camera. That gives an opening for your opponents to claim you may have switched or manipulated any of these areas, in which case, when reviewing the footage, the judge can see that and turn around and go, there is a suspect cause here that you may have cheated. So that it's in your best interest to keep everything in relation to the game on camera again. There will be times where you're looking to take your hands out of the view of the camera. This could be to blow your nose, grab a drink. These are all very reasonable things. One thing I like to do, just for added safety, I don't think this is a necessity, is if I have 4 cards in hand and I need to take my hands out of the view of the camera, I'll place them face down. The opponent can still clearly count how many cards there are there, and then I will remove the hands from shot to, blow the nose, grab a drink. What I do when I try and bring my hands back into shot is I always give them fanned out, show both sides of the hand to make sure I've not brought another card into play with me. I think it's very rare someone would call you out on that, but it's just an added protection. Everything you can do to prove that you are not cheating will make the difference in a tight matchup where someone's looking for an excuse to call you a cheater. Now that's the ideal world. Not everyone's going to be able to achieve that. Even I don't when I compete in online regionals. I'm going to pull back the curtain on my own setup and show you exactly how that will look for today's competition. So this is my setup for today. A lot of this equipment you won't necessarily need to have, or to this degree. I work from home and I am a content creator, so I have a lot of additional equipment that you may not need to be able to run the tournament. Right now, we're in daytime and we don't have overcast. But this extra light source can be important to make sure that the board state is clear all times. Showing this down and having it on the playmat is going to make sure my opponents can see my cards and they're not hidden in shadow. This is the microphone I'm using. This is plugged into an XLR mixer. Again, this is more than you need. Any basic built-in microphone will be enough to communicate. This is just nice to have for other reasons. Again, I keep this above and out of view of the camera so it doesn't obscure the play field. This is the webcam I showed you earlier, the Logitech C920. it's going to show the board to the opponents. It's going to show it in 1080p, which are the recommended requirements for most tournament organizers for online play. I run 2 monitors in my setup. I think this is very helpful. I keep Discord on the right-hand side, and I keep a pop-out window of the video call with my opponent on the left monitor. This means I can keep a focus on what's happening on the gameplay, and then to my right I can have my support software like Limitless TCG and Discord and OBS to record the games. So this is what the setup will look like in action. Now you have to remember that the opponent is getting this through a stream. The quality will degrade and it will be compressed. So while this looks quite clear on your screens, it probably won't be on theirs. The important thing is to make sure you're doing everything you can to give your opponent all the information they can. You'll notice as well that this angle is a little bit more top down. This means there's less space on me, the player, but that is a necessity of most setups. While we're placing everything on our mat ready for play, as you can see, everything is still clear. The only difference between the previous setup and the one I'm showing you now is that I need to be more careful about what I'm doing with my hands. I can keep my hands on display here, whereas on the previous setup, I could move all the way up to my chest and you could see them. I've now taken my cards out of the view of the camera. If a judge were to see this, or a player were to get the judge to check footage, they would be able to say that there was a reality where I swapped and exchanged cards. So I will need to keep them on the board and be more mindful of that. I could change the angle of my setup to make this easier for me when I look at this in a testing phase. Now that I've altered my setup, the board is still completely visible, as is my leader, my Don, and my deck. But now I have more space to show off my hand without revealing the contents of it. My opponents can clearly see that I have 5 cards in hand, and I'm not showing anything. That is just a slight adjustment where I've lowered the stand my webcam is on and tilted the webcam up slightly to show more of my torso and more of my hand while still keeping everything visible on the board. When it gets into gameplay, one thing to be mindful of in the online space is that typically when you play in locals or offline, your opponent will cut your deck for you, after you've given it a good shuffle, of course. Here, it's typically good etiquette to ask your opponent how you would like your deck to be cut. They will provide instructions for you. Most of the time, opponents will say, cut it in half and put the bottom half on top. Some may have different and special requests. Maybe it's 3 piles, and then they specify a particular order to restack your deck. Personally, I just keep it simple with a half and half cut, bottom half goes on the top, and to make absolutely sure that my opponent isn't doing any tomfoolery, I request that they take the top 5 cards of their deck and place them to the bottom. That way, the starting hand is something they've not been able to manipulate. You've got your setup ready, you've submitted your deck list, it's the day of the tournament. Before all the action kicks off, there is a little bit of housekeeping to do, and that comes in the form of a welcome speech. I like to compare welcome speeches to the safety talk at the beginning of a flight. It's very important, if this is your first time competing, that you pay attention to all of the instructions. But if you're a frequent flyer, it can seem a little bit repetitive and you might feel the desire to tune out. I will parrot the line all the airlines do, which is that please pay attention to the safety briefing as it may have changed since you last traveled. For the most part, this doesn't really change that much, and most TOs would give you a heads up in advance of the tournament of any rule changes that you need to pay attention to. I still advise paying attention. There may be some nuances on the day that have changed since you last competed, so it's always good to pay attention and listen to your judge team that are going to adjudicate the entire tournament. If you then check Limitless, you're going to be given your first pairing. You'll be assigned a table number in the Discord. You will then find that table number, connect, turn your camera on, and wait for your opponent to join. After you go through some pleasantries like deciding turn order, getting your deck shuffled and cut in view of your opponent, it's then ready to start the game. For my first round today, I got seeded into a Nami. To me, that outlier deck that doesn't really interact with the board in a meaningful way as other decks do, doesn't have a place. And I'll save my thoughts on Nami for another time, because this isn't going to be a Nami rant video. To give you the TLDR, I got my head caved in. I'm sure I didn't play this matchup correctly. That happens quite a lot, and I tend to not beat a Nami. This guy, very chill. He told me he didn't really want to play Nami. He had another deck lined up, but just couldn't get the pieces together in time. So he ended up playing Nami, ended up taking the dub off of me. The first swing into this guy, Impel down, All Stars. Trigger effect, draw 2 cards. Okay, it happens. That's the only function that card serves in the deck, and it's there. Perfect. Next time the opponent takes life, Sanji's Pilaf. Trigger effect. Draw 2 cards. Fantastic. He's milling his deck even more. Swing into him again. Another Impel Down All-Stars. Wow. What an interactive deck. 4th life. Another Sanji's Pilaf. And I never even got the swing on the 5th life because he'd already milled up his deck by that point. The stars aligned for the Nami player, and I hope that they go and buy a lottery ticket because they're probably due a win based on this tremendous luck they found. Moving into round 2, I went against a Black Luffy. This is a matchup I'm not too afraid of typically because I still believe it is Lucci favored, but I was really struggling to see my pieces. I couldn't remove his first Jack on curve. I then couldn't remove his second Jack on the board. And after that, you kind of fall behind on removal and there's no way back into it. So congratulations to both of my opponents. They do ultimately deserve the wins. I hope them the best of luck with the rest of the day. Now we get into the slight change in perspective when you play in online tournaments. Now, if I was playing an offline tournament and I went X and 2, I would more than likely play it out. I'm there for the day anyway. I can potentially go even and get some good prizing. Online regionals tend not to have very good prizing. So, I had 2 choices ahead of me, currently X2. I could try and win all 8 of my next games and lose my entire day. The compensation for such probably would have been a top 64 finish, which I believe gets me a Shirahoshi prize card. It's very nice, it's sparkly, ooh, Shirahoshi, mermaid, woo. But the likelihood would be that I wouldn't make that top 64. I'm already on the back foot and I need to win 8 games in a row. The statistical likelihood of that happening is so slim that I don't think it's worth the attempt. And if I go 7 and 3, if I'm in the top 8 players who went 7 and 3 off of my tie breaks, I could still get that Shirahoshi. Again, very unlikely considering I lost the first 2 rounds. After that, really the only incentive for me to play is maybe a Gear 5 Don, 2 Gear 5 Don, and some Luffy sleeves. The Gear 5 Don is nice, right? But I don't want to lose my entire day for that. So after I went X2 in the first 2 rounds, I ultimately decided to drop. I'm at home, I haven't traveled anywhere, I'm not bored up for the entire day. Actually, it gives me a lot of time to get things done, like this video. If you just want to get the reps in and practice and play interesting matchups, potentially, it can be worth an entire day. Sit down, play some One Piece from the comfort of your home, take regular breaks, and honestly, it's a cheap day out. You are going to be paying 35 euros in Europe, typically to do this, but you will get some good participation. You get 6 booster packs of whichever set the TO has lying around. Hopefully I'm going to get some 08 from this. And you also get a participation pack, which will have regional stamped cards. These are really nice, and they're good collectors. Sometimes you get some good cards that are functional, and you can run in decks. Sometimes they're just alternate arts that look quite nice. Regardless of what you play online regionals for, they are a fantastic tool for the One Piece community because it enables more players to get involved with higher level organized play. There's less barriers to entry, it's easier to get involved, you just need a webcam, a mic, a PC, and a stable internet connection, which in 2024, most people have access to some form of that. So the next time you see signups for an online regional or treasure cup, I highly recommend you trying to take part. If it's your first time, just scroll through this video or even check in with TOs. There's loads of FAQs you can go to be able to get the setup you need to take part. Online play exists to reduce the barriers to entry of organized play. And I will always stand behind that. More people competing is better for the health of the game, and more people are able to find something they truly enjoy. Competition is my favorite thing about One Piece because I get to meet and engage with people all around the world. So give it a try. What are you waiting for?